In the last couple of videos, we talked about quality choice, right? So choosing quality level for a monopoly and choosing quality level for an oligopoly. And what we saw for the oligopoly was that they wanted to be as far apart as possible. And so what we want to do here is think about choosing a horizontal characteristic. And so we're going to use the hoteling model that we talked about in chapter 7. And remember that the idea here is we're sort of using an analogy where consumers are distributed uniformly along, a linear street, or sometimes we call it a beach, but it can represent tastes, right? Horizontal tastes. And the idea is that, you get utility from consuming the product, that's S, and then minus the price you have to pay, and then minus some transportation cost, right? So T is the transportation cost, and D is the distance that you have to go to the store. And so this could be, a literal distance of actually going to the store, or it could be a figurative distance of, all right, well, that's not exactly the type of product I wanted, but it's close. And so how much do I have to sort of pay for that? So for a monopoly, right, if there's just one store, right, then they're going to want to be right in the middle of town. So to maximize demand, they'll be right here at point A. And the amount of utility that people get will be just a linear function of how far away they are from the store, right? So if you happen to live right next to the store, if that is exactly what you want, then you get the most utility. And if you're far away on either the left or the right, then you will just get the minimum amount of utility, right? And so this assumes that all customers are served, which is reasonable in this market, right? But you're just going to price it so that these people are basically just indifferent between getting it or not. Now, what about if we have two firms? So Hoteling looked at this problem, right, a long time ago. So it's a duopoly version, but he assumed that output prices are fixed. And so the idea is, all right, well, we've got two ice cream vendors on mobile carts. Where can they locate? And the sort of paradoxical solution is that they both end up in the middle. And so you have one like on the just left of the middle and one just right of the middle. And this one is serving all of these customers over here. And this one is serving all of these customers over here. And this is similar to the median voter model, right? Where the idea is that both candidates end up in the middle and then they split the vote 50-50. Obviously, there's a few, basic assumptions. The most important assumption is actually the idea of this linear street. So if we think about, why they sort of end up in the middle is, all right, well, if I try to move a little bit to the left, say, then my competitor just kind of inches towards me and still gets all of the customers on the other side because I'm still closer to them than my competitor. And so the only equilibrium is to be right at the middle. And this is the principle of minimum differentiation, right? And so we had the principle of maximum differentiation when we were talking about quality. You wanted to be as far apart as possible. Here, you want to be as close as possible. And actually, the most important assumption that's driving this result is the idea of this linear street, where there's nothing on the other side of 0 and there's nothing on the other side of 1. And so that might be realistic in some situations, but it might not be realistic in other situations, right? Remember, we talked about the Salop model, which is a circle, and we can get different results there, and actually we do. So what can we say if prices vary? Actually, we can't say much, unfortunately, right? So if you're choosing price as well as location, there's no clear equilibrium as long as transportation costs are linear. So the idea is that firms benefit from distancing themselves from one another because that dampens price competition, but they also want to inch closer to customers to steal excuse me, to the competitors to steal the customers. So Daspermont showed that if you have quadratic costs, so costs are actually convex and increasing, they'll want to maximize their distance apart, and so they will choose, location 0 and 1. And as we said, this is very dependent on having that linear street. So if you solve this with a Salop circle, the number of the firms will locate at either ends of the circle. And if you have more than 2 firms, they'll locate, evenly spread apart if they can move costlessly. So I think this is important to think about the assumptions of a model that are driving it, and when those assumptions are realistic, or what types of market they're realistic in, and when they are not so realistic.